Gospel of Luke, chapter 23 and verse 46. Confidence at the cross. Confidence at the cross. At every point, Jesus was in charge. He would not allow himself to be put to death until he felt his time had come. On different occasions, he miraculously escaped from those who attempted to take his life. And he said, "My time is not yet come." Once men took up stones to kill him, but he would not allow this to happen because it was his prophetic wish and obligation not to be stoned, but to be crucified on a cross. He said in John 3, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Therefore, he would not allow himself to be stoned. Neither would he allow his nature or the nature of his mission to be miscomprehended. When men attempted to make him a bread provider alone, or a political leader, he disappointed them and disillusioned them by letting them know that his domain covered the things of the Spirit, and that his primary concern was for the souls of men. Jesus was at every point in charge. He chose the time of his death. When the soldiers came looking for him, it was he who found the soldiers. And he asked them in John 18:2, "Whom seek ye?" And Jesus of Nazareth, they answered, and they retreated and fell to the ground when he said, "I am he." Jesus was in charge. He performed the miracle of healing on one of his captors. And while the crowd was disturbed and riotous, while Pilate was confused and indecisive, while the Pharisees and the priests were possessed of their evil schemes, while the disciples were so afraid and disappointed that their hearts leapt within them, while Mary, the mother of Jesus, was numbed and overwhelmed by her sadness, when all around him was in a state of confusion, Jesus alone was composed and in charge. He would not die until he had left instructions for his mother's care. He would not die until all prophecy had been fulfilled. And then he said, "No man takes my life, but I lay it down." You see, Jesus at this time, as he was all through his life, undergirded by his unshakable faith and by his strong sense of the presence of God. No matter how dark the sky became, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed, Jesus remained strong. And if you really want to understand a person, if you really want to know the true nature of a person, observe that person in the midst of danger and crisis. Listen to him when he's shocked or surprised or caught off guard. It is at these times that fair weather faith disappears and false personalities and put-ons fall away. But the faith of Jesus was not weak or anemic. It was firm until the last breath. And my prayer today is, Lord, give me that kind of faith. That was the kind of faith Bishop Pryor had. Somebody said he was always the same. Not wishy-washy, not anemic, always committed, always the same, always loving, always involved in committal to the work of the Lord. But Jesus knew that God was the King of the universe. And though Jesus had been crucified and rejected at the cruel hands of men, and though he was meeting ended at the cross at what seemed to be the beginning of his career. His possibilities unmeasured. His hopes unrealized. He was dying as a thief. Of those whom he called disciples, one betrayed him and another denied him, and all left him alone to face his agony. In the midst of all this, Jesus knew that no matter what men did, God would never leave him, and God would never forsake him. Therefore, Jesus was able, being crucified on the cross, to say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Now, these are, number one, words of love, and they are words of devotion. Christ was crucified because God's plan for salvation demanded that he die for the sins of the world. God gave his only begotten Son a ransom for us. He gave his Son to die in our places, but this did not cause Jesus to become regretful or resentful or to lose his love of God. He could have said, even as Job said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Jesus did not curse God. Jesus did not ridicule God. He did not assert his divine prerogatives or take things into his own hands. But when he had absorbed all the pain and all the suffering that life could impose upon him, Jesus said, Father, I still love you. And even though I've gone through all of this, I commend my spirit into your hands. And today many people feel that as children of God, every day ought to be sunny. Every month ought to be the month of May. They don't want to be tried. They don't want to be persecuted. They don't want to go through any kind of rough times or mean times. And some leave the Lord because they feel that God did not answer their prayer. They feel that God allowed too many difficulties to come into their lives. But even when it seems that we can take no more, we need to be able to say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. But number two, not only are these words of love and words of devotion, these are words of confidence, dependence, and trust. A truly wise man knows not only his assets and his abilities, he's also aware of his weaknesses, of his limitations, and of his liabilities. And the truly wise man never steps beyond the realm of his ability. And Jesus, as a man, was a limited being. He had to pray. He was tempted. He was tried just as we are. He grew weary and had to rest just as we do. And Jesus realized every moment that he derived his strength and his power from God the Father. He acknowledged that he was totally dependent on God. And when on the cross he reached the end of his emotional reserve, and when his spiritual reservoir was exhausted, and when everybody and everything else had failed him, he still knew about somebody who will not fail. Is there anybody here who knows somebody that will not fail? So his mind led him back to the psalm that he had read in Psalm 31. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. Bow down thy ear to me. Deliver me speedily. Be thou my strong rock and my fortress. And in verse 5, into thine hand